We're following the latest developments on the Korean Peninsula, where North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and South Korean President Moon Jae-in will meet for the first time in over a decade Friday. In another historic move, President Trump and Kim Jong-un are looking to hold a summit in just a few weeks.
Over the weekend, North Korea said it would suspend nuclear and intercontinental ballistic missile tests, as well as close its nuclear testing facility. And CBS News senior global affairs contributor Ian Bremmer is the author of a new book called Us versus Them, The Failure of Globalism. Ian is also the founder and president of the Eurasia Group, and he joins us now. Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much. Tomorrow,
it comes out tomorrow.
Yes, drop soon.
We've already had it because we knew you were coming. So let's talk a little bit about the book and also talk about, you were tweeting, you were replying to some of the tweets that were coming out about North Korea this weekend, including the fact that the president suggested that North Korea is going to denuclearize.
Yeah.
Do you believe that North Korea is going to denuclearize?
No, I don't. And no one serious about the issue.
President seems to believe it.
Well, the president seems to tweet it. And believing and tweeting are two different things, as I think we all know, especially when we're talking about the president. I think the ability of President Trump to get something considerably less than denuclearization and announce it as the best deal that's ever been done by any president in history is possible, right? And that's actually a good thing, right? Like, we don't want this to be a really impossible ask and then the thing blows up immediately, right? I think the meeting's going to happen. I think that there will be progress. The fact that Kim Jong-un has offered to suspend tests, which he had offered before. That's not. I don't know why last week's news was seen as breaking. He's actually said he was going, as long as negotiations were ongoing, he said, I'm suspending. That was well over 2 months ago at this point. That was before the Olympics. And the United States, in return, offered a summit. And, both sides are now saying, let's find a way to work together. And I think that once the first meeting happens, especially because the Americans haven't made any further demands on Kim Jong-un during the Pompeo trip to Pyongyang, I think that means that they really want to make sure that the setting for the meeting is ready to be positive. Now, let's see.
Observers have basically said that just having the meeting sort of put on the schedule is a win for North Korea. That's good enough because they're getting sort of legitimized. But what is a win for the Trump administration if this meeting goes through?
Well, as I said, the fact that they are no longer testing ICBMs and nukes,
and as long as they hold to that, that's good enough.
That's not a deal,
right?
But it's better than where we were. I mean, they were testing with reckless abandon. They were improving their ICBM capabilities, improving targeting, distance of success, ability to carry a big payload, re-entry without breaking up, all the things that would allow them to hit the continental United States, which was our red line. So if they're suspending that test, and we haven't given them anything but a summit, for me that actually feels pretty good.
What about the Americans that are being held there?
Yeah, well, again, that's been discussed, and it would not surprise me if, as a part of ongoing diplomacy, we could see the Americans being held in North Korea let go. The one thing that we're not going to see is the recognition of Kim Jong-un as the legitimate leader of North Korea, given that he basically runs the world's largest human concentration camp. That's unfortunate, right?
But doesn't meeting with the president of the United States give him that legitimacy?
I know. That's what I'm saying. So we're not going to be able to press on that sort of stuff. We've lost the ability to talk about those issues through this summit. We're really limiting it. And by the way, in a similar way to Obama, like Obama on Iran said, yeah, we've got problems with terrorism, problem with ballistic missiles, Hezbollah, but let's just focus on this. And a lot of people criticized him for saying, well, that means you're doing a deal with these horrible Iranians. Well, Trump is saying, let's focus on the thing that we're really worried about, not how they treat people, not the destabilization inside, all the rest, not the threat to South Korea. Let's focus on what we care about, America first. And frankly, that gives a better chance for these deals, these negotiations to be productive.
I really like the fact that you brought up the Iran deal and President Obama, and now we're talking about North Korea, because the Iran deal has been politicized. There are some people, particularly in the GOP, who don't like the Iran deal. The president doesn't like it. He's talked about removing the United States from it.
Right.
There are others who praise President Obama for making this deal with Iran. how is what Donald Trump doing with North Korea different than what President Obama was attempting to do with Iran? They are both threats. They were both. Iran was a threat to the United States and to its neighbors. North Korea has threatened to destroy South Korea, Japan, the United States, everybody. But people seem to be more, it seems as if with President Trump and this proposed meeting that he's being applauded by both sides of the aisle.
Well, I mean, part of the problem was that when Obama did this limited deal, he also made it sound like this was this massive breakthrough and we were now friends with the Iranians, which was not true at all. So he talked it up so much, and particularly Kerry, who spent like his entire life for a year and a half doing it, talked it up so much that when we realized that actually this was a fairly limited deal and we had still big problems with Iran and we still had big sanctions on Iran and still doing a lot of things we didn't like, and they're testing their ballistic missiles, which is, not in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolutions, for example, so the Americans really don't like it, then we say, well, wait a second. Like, why are we working with these guys? And I think what we see with both Obama and with Trump on Iran and North Korea is an effort to come to terms with an incredibly intractable problem. And if we get a solution, it's not going to be a very satisfying solution.
Right. That's, I guess, the point. Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if Trump ends up doing something significant, which takes some of the heat out of the relationship so that we don't worry about incinerating millions of Koreans, there are going to be a lot of people that are deeply unhappy with the fact that North Korea down the road is still a nuclear power and is still a concentration camp, and here's Kim Jong-un, and now he's like sitting fat and happy.
I want to get to the book, but one last question on this. Do you think
Come on, you guys sitting fat and happy with Kim Jong-un? You didn't even bite on that. What's wrong with you?
Because you say such interesting things, right?
I think the president would be pleased.
I
think
can fat shame Kim Jong-un, right? Yes, okay, thank you.
Kim Jong-un sitting fat and happy.
Yeah,
I wonder. I wonder then if this becomes a situation like what we saw in Latin and Central America in the 70s and 80s, which is the United States says, look, we got something out of this deal that we really wanted, and we are going to now turn a blind eye to some of the things that you are doing in your country. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was, hey, don't turn towards the Soviet Union, turn towards us, and we'll let you murder and imprison your political dissidents and enemies without really meddling in your affairs. Can we see something similar happening down the road?
Again, it's not new. The Americans have been willing to tolerate all sorts of abysmal practices for people that have been tactically useful to us for decades and decades. Osama bin Laden in the early days, for example, was on our side before he really wasn't. Saddam Hussein, Donald Rumsfeld in the early days, military deals, all the rest. This goes on and on. So Kim Jong-un would be a particularly egregious version of that because he is the world's only remaining totalitarian despot. But let's face it, the Chinese are about to be the world's largest economy. They're much more important in North Korea than the Americans are, and they've been tolerating this, for lack of a better word, for a very long time. So the idea that the Americans are going to engage in regime change on this stuff, or that we ourselves are somehow going to meaningfully shift what's happening on the ground, is about as unlikely as when Obama said Assad must go.
All right, so really interesting stuff from me and Bremmer. We're also going to
talk about his book.
Yeah, his book is just an incredible book, and we have a whole discussion around that we're going to play coming up. That'll be after the break.
So also coming up after the break, according to a study, Amazon